Alpha webinar. The new era of AI in knowledge management starts now.
The future starts now.
The future starts now. My name is Gabriel Mayrink. I'm Chief Revenue Officer at Zeta Alpha, and I'm here with Jakub Zavrel, who's the founder and CEO of the company. And I think we can just jump in, right? So I think the first question is, why does the era of AI in knowledge management start now?
Really, because of all these breakthroughs in large language models.
Right.
I think that's the defining moment. A lot of information in enterprise knowledge is unstructured data, and basically we now have this universal capability to both understand and digest and summarize and generate human language and human IQ level text at scale.
Okay.
And that's a really big deal.
That's really nice. So if I hear you well, so now we are actually working with the machines. So why is it important? Why does it matter?
Well, mainly because it's not like we have not had human intelligence before, but it's mainly about productivity and the scale at which it's available, right? So no human can read more than so many pages of information per day. We're very good at producing information. Our capacity to digest information is very limited. Now you can do this at a scale of millions or billions of documents. So that's a really strong augmentation for an individual human's productivity.
Right.
But the cost equation is also astonishing. 1,000 words of text, how long does it take you to read?
Takes some time. Yeah.
2 pages, right? Yeah, half an hour to write it, maybe an hour.
Yeah.
Human cost of doing that is, let's say, 20 to 40 euros an hour. Machine cost of doing that is a few cents. And that's many orders of magnitude. And I think that's where businesses need to start paying attention, because that's a major business differentiator.
Okay, so have an improvement in accuracy, in efficiency, in speed, and scalability as well, right? I think other benefit as well that such AI technology bring is actually in decision-making, improving decision-making throughout the whole entire value chain of a company, all the way from the inbound logistics, operations, to outbound touching on customer, right? And in functions as well. As long as it's knowledge intensive, be it marketing, be it HR, and any others, right?
Presumably, knowledge is important in good decision making, right?
Exactly.
The more knowledge you can bring to bear on decision making, the better decisions you're going to make, unless you're overwhelmed, as humans are. Because of this cognitive augmentation, I think, we can really shift the needle there.
Yeah. Okay, that's really great. And these are a lot of benefits, and there are many more. But there's also a flip side, right? And I think also our audience is well educated enough, and they might be aware of some of the challenges. So I'd like you to touch also some of the challenges that using the latest and greatest of AI for knowledge management brings with it.
Well, it's really easy to get started, right? So I assume you've been to ChatGPT and played around with it.
Exactly. Yeah. I assume I use almost every day for some of my basic daily activities as well. So responsibly. I hope I'm not replaced by it, but
you give it a spin. You write a little bit, right? You generate some ideas, a bullet list, a plan, get you out of the writer's block, make a piece of writing more polished.
Exactly.
But the real challenge is when you ask it questions, right? And I think this one of the main use cases in knowledge management is to actually use GPT to provide you with information. People even say it's going to maybe dethrone Google as a search engine.
Yeah.
But obviously it's trained on huge amount of material, but not on the material from inside your company.
Right.
So if you want to use it for anything inside your company, it's going to need to have that information to provide the right answer.
Yeah, exactly.
Otherwise, it's just going to make stuff up.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's what people call hallucinations, right?
Hallucinations, confabulations,
Right.
it just makes stuff up.
So basically they look like they're the right answers or good outputs, but they're not. They're not accurate, or they're just plain wrong.
Exactly.
Right.
And there's one main recipe to to kind of overcome that, and that's to feed it the information from inside your organization, to feed it documents from, your documentation, your project reports, your memos, etc. And then it can really accurately answer questions about them.
Okay, so that's really great. So once you can actually use your own knowledge, right, and use all the smart ability of actually such technology, then I think you're well covered. There's less chances of hallucinations, so you get more.
It becomes really useful.
Really useful.
Yeah.
But also that comes with a question that I get often, which is about, do I as a company, shall I trust my data, my knowledge, my information to such new technology, right? So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think if you talk about enterprise information management or knowledge management or enterprise search, it's really all about security, right? How do you prevent data from leaking outside of the organization? Well, if you just cut and paste them into the ChatGPT consumer app, that's gonna go wrong. So providing information from your company resources into a large language model for question answering, you need to build this foundation layer, which is secure, bridges the different silos in your information landscape. Probably you don't have information only in one place, but you have it scattered among many different applications like Slack and Google Drive and Confluence and all SharePoint, all the others. So you need to connect that information and preserve the access right. It's not because you're now indexing this information using some sort of fancy AI technology that now everybody can read everything. So you're going to need a foundational layer, which is both able to answer questions, and we'll come to that in a bit more with neural search, but it's also needs to be secure, so you can filter out who has access to what, and you need to preserve that throughout the whole process.
Right. So I think we heard of actually of a big company where employees were throwing confidential data on a ChatGPT. So not good practice.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. There are safe ways of doing it. So and then so if I understand you well, so there is this layer that should actually, this foundation that should be well designed, right, and implemented in companies before actually you can make use of be it GPT or any other generative AI algorithm or any other large language model. So how does that work? What's happening there in this foundation layer?
Well, so you need it to be secure. You need to connect all the different information sources, but most importantly, it also needs to provide the right answers, right? And this is really where companies have struggled in the past. So basically, natural language type of questions, when you ask a real question about something, we've been kind of trained not to do that, right? We've been conditioned to use keywords, and that's because the traditional enterprise search technology works on the basis of keywords.
Right.
But when you have a question, like what's the best way to improve this machine part in this particular production process, you don't actually want to find information that has similar questions, but you want to find the answers. And this is really where neural search plays an important role.
Right.
And neural search is basically a way to implement semantic search really efficiently, right? You have a question, you want to find the answer, regardless of which keywords are used, and really kind of narrowing down on the actual concepts.
Okay, so basically the technology allows you, especially, well, I think now and maybe since ever, most of the data is actually unstructured data, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I think also the technology shines, neural search technology shines.
Yeah.
Allows you to really get more relevant search results. And
everything in unstructured data.
Everything in unstructured data,
right? Yes. Almost all relevant documents are.
So then in summary until now, so if you have a connection to all your company knowledge, all the different systems integrations, right? If you have this good neural search layer where actually can get relevant search, and such good relevant search results are actually fed into the GPT or similar, the large language model. That's where actually that's the good practice. That's the way to go.
Yeah, and that's also where the productivity effects are unlocked, right?
Yeah.
Because if you get a traceable answer that refers directly to verifiable pieces of information in company documents, then you can work with it,
right.
And it's much faster than reading through, many long memos and trying to find that information. So
that's great. Now I wanted to take a step back. So if I'm a business decision maker, I'm thinking, is this actually does this apply to my industry? Does it apply to my sector, to my industry, to my company? Is such sort of solution, right, including neurosearch plus GPT, applicable to some particular industries, or this is really cross industry?
Well, I think that knowledge plays a role in many different industries, right? But there are obviously some sectors which are more knowledge intensive than others.
Right.
And what we see at Zeta Alpha is that basically in sectors which are very reliant on R&D, on high-tech engineering, on reuse of knowledge, right? And on discovery of new knowledge, which you might not necessarily already have access to.
Yeah.
That's really where, it's essentially where people use a lot of search, right? So search has always been kind of at the foundational layer of knowledge management.
Yeah.
But people have been frustrated that it was very inefficient and you could only find the things that you already knew.
Yes.
So all sort of R&D departments, technology players, high-tech engineering players, but also in legal and the financial services industry, which are by now also very knowledge intensive, you will see this. And I think if you talk about productivity, if you look at GPT, right, and it is a lot faster than you writing 1,000-word summary of a document.
Exactly.
But if you talk about knowledge reuse and you talk about like 6 months of work of a 10-person team that just gets forgotten when the new project starts, that's a much larger productivity killer.
It is. That's really great. So basically, as long as you're knowledge intensive, right? So I think you can derive benefits from GPT and from neurosearch. But still, depending on the use case, companies may still say, no, I don't want my data to go out. I want to do this on premise. So does it have to be one solution fits all, as in you really have to use, I don't know, we're talking about GPT because that's naturally the most popular. Mm-hmm. Does it have to be this one solution, or is on-premise also possible? So if you touch on that as well.
Yeah, I think you can see it much more as a process of staying within your regulatory bounds, staying within your policy. So if your policy is on-prem, there are good large language model, open source large language models that are commercially applicable that can be installed on-prem. Okay. And also search foundational layers like ours can be installed on-prem.
Right.
So you can definitely do that. One important thing is also that you shouldn't necessarily think of this as like replacing everything you got and driving in the new shiny objects.
Right.
You can really see it as an upgrade process where you build on top of what you have, make this foundational layer more semantic, and stay within the policies that you need to have.
Okay, so that's really great. So it's not necessarily something that it comes across as very disruptive, but as an organization that it's moving forward, right? So there is a very non-disruptive way of actually deriving the benefits, implementing the technology and using it for daily workflows, right?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing is to kind of start experimenting quickly, right? Find a corner of the space which is really important for you, where productivity really matters, either because the teams are small or the knowledge sharing is not optimal, or you really have a strong business driver,
right?
And then start to experiment. right?
Okay. Yeah.
Pulling, you can also start from the other way, just go to GPT and imagine, kind of get your imagination fired up and imagine what it could do if it would have access. And then you can kind of one by one, connect information sources, make them semantically discoverable,
Okay.
and drive it from there.
Okay, very good. So I think the message GPT is great, but GPT alone is not enough. But any other tips or any other advice going forward for those who want to get to know more and to get started?
Well, I think it's a really exciting time, and not only because of these technological breakthroughs are making this productivity possible, but also in particular for knowledge management practitioners, right?
Right.
Knowledge management has sometimes been this sort of orphan child, a little bit the librarian of the enterprise, right?
Yeah.
And now on the wave of these AI developments, knowledge management departments can become kind of the star of driving the change, of actually bringing the generative AI revolution inside their organizations and organizing that.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really exciting opportunity right now.
I think therefore the new era of AI knowledge management, right?
And we've been talking a lot about neural search, and we'd love to go a little bit deeper on that, what it means, how how to get started with that, what pitfalls to avoid, like for example, bad authorization models in neural search. So
okay, so I think for the next next edition, we'll cover neural search more in detail.
Yeah.
Right. At a level that also it's good for broad audience, because everyone is welcome again. Before we go, I think you still have time to take questions potentially from the audience. We have a question, so I'll read the question. Would you advise organizations to use OpenAI API or open source models?
So that really depends on your company's policies and regulatory requirements. So I think the advantage of OpenAI, I think everybody kind of agrees that at least GPT-4 is the most powerful model and probably more capable than even other commercial competitors like Cohere and Anthropic, kind of trying to catch up. They're pretty good. The GPT-3 model is kind of on a similar level from many different vendors.
Okay.
But OpenAI, is the market leader there. And important to know is that you can opt out of any sort of data collection practices that they have, right? So you can avoid your data being stored and avoid your data from being used for improvements of the model. Another route that we see quite a lot with our customers is that they want to use the GPT models, but not in the US hosted environment. So we see that Microsoft is actually deploying the OpenAI models in Microsoft Azure.
Right.
Not GPT-4 yet in Europe, but they have 3 and 3.5.
Okay.
So that's a pretty good option. And with the open source models, it's I think there is still a quality gap, but they're catching up really fast. We've seen models like Falcon being released this week. They're pretty close to GPT-3. Okay. You always have to look carefully at the licenses and the hosting costs and all that, but it's a real alternative if you want to have everything on-prem in your own organization.
That's great. So I hope this answers the question. We have another one that came in. Question is there a way to find out how GPT models are making decisions?
Well, I think it's important to frame it a little bit differently. Humans are making decisions, right? So we really see these large language models as decision support for humans. And that can only work well if it's kind of transparent, explainable. Yeah. So that's why this kind of retrieval or search grounding with traceable references to the source material is super important, right? So in some sense, the transparency comes in the search augmentation of these large language models.
Right. And a question that came after this one, actually, a question also to you from me. Does fine-tuning models come into play here in some way?
So definitely in the search part,
Okay.
right? Because search relevance in, let's say, the biomedical domain or the chemistry domain or the legal domain requires quite different embeddings, it's called,
Okay.
right? And different vector search models.
Right.
In the generative AI domain, I think with the weaker series of models, if you look at some of the open source models, and if you look at some of the sort of older generation models, fine-tuning used to be really important. And as we move towards these more capable and instruction-tuned models like GPT-4, fine-tuning and giving examples but becoming less and less relevant. So really, on that question, the goalposts are shifting very quickly.
Knowledge from it. Thank you everyone for joining. As Jakub said, we're starting a series. So next one, we'll go deeper into neural search, right? So you're all very welcome. So it was a real pleasure. Thank you for joining. If you want to know more about Zeta Alpha, just check us online, zetaalpha.com, and we are here to help you. Thank you so much.